use of generative AI doubled between 2023 and 2024 from 33% of respondents to 65% of responding companies.
ChatGPT is by far of the surveyed group the most recognized.
People are still pretty amazed by these early abilities of what we would consider these text-to-text early abilities from a year and a half or more ago.
If you're only talking about 18% who use it either daily or weekly, that's really a small amount.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is June 10th, 2024, and this is the Daily AI Show live. And today we're going to be talking about a Reuters report that came out a little while ago, a couple weeks ago at this point, AI in the future of news. So we're going to be diving deep into that because they did a lot of statistics. They went through 6 different countries and put out some surveys out there to about 2,000 people in each of the 6 countries. We'll dive into all of that. Today we have Jyunmi, Andy, Beth, and I'm Brian. And before we get going, I want to tell people that, successfully our first newsletter went out this morning, went out on Sunday. So yesterday morning. And it was our first edition. So we're really excited to have that out there. If you're interested in joining the newsletter, the goal of the newsletter is not just to rehash exactly what was on the show, because we know you guys can come and hang out with us here on the show, whatever platform you might be listening or watching to us on, but it's actually just to go a little bit deeper. As a group, as a 7 of us, we always felt like, hey, there's more to share that we often do in our private Slack channels. After the show goes dark, meaning after we stop hitting record, we often talk for a few minutes afterwards. And so we wanted to have a place to share more of that AI content. So if you love what we're doing, if you love this show, but you're like, hey, I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit more about what they're talking about, even when they're not live. Basically, if you can't get enough of us, go ahead and subscribe to the newsletter. You can go over to the dailyaishow.com. It's very easy there. And like I said, the first edition just went out yesterday morning, and we will be getting all sorts of feedback and making adjustments. So if you want to be part of that evolution and change, then definitely get in there, because you'll be hearing from me about what you thought of the newsletter and all that good stuff. Okay, so let's jump into the conversation today. Like I said, today is about a Reuters report. It's called AI in the Future of News. It was from May of 2024. And then the subtitle here is, what does the public in 6 countries think of generative AI in news? Now, I will say, though, and this is the reason why we talk about it, you might be thinking like, wow, that's sort of like a niche thing for a whole show, just about journalism and news. But actually, with the research and the survey that they did, it actually pulls back a whole lot more about maybe the general consensus of what the global population, if you will, is even thinking about AI and AI tools. And maybe it's surprising, maybe it's not. I don't know. That's really kind of what we want to dig into. Jyunmi, I know you were just sort of talking about some of the tools, and maybe before you get into like the perplexities and the claudes and stuff, do you want to kind of just sort of set the stage here as far as what they did, or if not, I can pull it up here on the screen.
Sure. They did an online survey, like Brian said, over 6 countries, and then got a little over 2,000 responses from each of those. So it's a survey pool of approximately 12 to 13,000 people. And what we noticed as an overall is they wanted to find out, number one, how much generative AI is in the public's mind space, right? Like how aware are they of generative AI? What are the tools that they are that they're using or paying attention to, or even just, are aware of, and then a breakdown of what is their use like. And that's kind of where we get into the nitty gritty of the survey questions, is what percentage of people are actually using it daily, weekly, monthly, or just ever. And so we can see while this is like a 40-page report, they've neatly broken it down to 2 main figures or 2 main graphs that can give you a great overview of what they're talking about. And we'll definitely add the link to the report in the show notes, and shout out to Beth for adding it into our LinkedIn event there. But one of the things that I wanted to open up to everyone was the initial question of, recognition, right? Because their first graph is a breakdown of these fairly popular tools. And I will admit some of them I have very little experience with myself, and draw some conclusions from that. And of course, we'll open it up with ChatGPT being the number one tool that everyone is familiar with.
Well, it's the highest percentage.
You're right. Yes, you're right. It is the highest percentage. You're right.
But as it turns out, a lot of people still are not familiar with it. But it is definitely the highest of all the tools that they looked at for sure.
I will just make a couple of points about this, which is it appears to me that this particular graph represents a survey which listed these things specifically rather than allowing the respondents to state which ones they actually used. And if something was missing, and I'm going to point one out that's glaringly missing from this list for the public use, then they wouldn't have an opportunity, presumably, then to add that, and it wouldn't even show up. And that one is the number 3 most widely used in the United States, which is character AI. It's not even on this list. So there's, that's kind of an indication that surveys can introduce their own bias, like by not including character, and why they would have excluded that when it's the number 3 AI generative website out there.
My guess is because this is focused on journalism and news, and so that character.ai
is replica something that should be included for journalism and news and not character AI?
It's a replica is an LLM, isn't it? Like, I'm not as familiar with replica, but it's an LLM where you could potentially use it to get news sources to stuff, right? Versus character AI, I'm just pointing out that like character AI, you wouldn't. Well, I don't know. Maybe you would. Maybe you would say, "Oh, I want to talk to a
Snapchat my AI." That's news. Well, I suppose for a certain audience. Okay, so anyway, it's very confusing introductions there.
Fair point.
But just in general, I want to say that this is about public attitudes, and so some of the conclusions that come out of focusing on a distribution of age groups, gender, region, and political leanings that are among the general public is going to miss, in some cases, a clearer view of what's happening in the adoption of generative AI in companies like yours.
Mm-hmm. So do you want to look at some of these numbers on here, Jyunmi, or do you want to like break it down? Because basically here, I'll pull it back up on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of highlights, with Andy's caveat there that I wanted to highlight. And again, we can go back to of the list, the highest percentage recognized is ChatGPT. Now this figure here is simply just recognizing the AI or the company around that their AI tool, and ChatGPT is by far of the surveyed group the most recognized. And there's some other names here that I agree with in terms of I think the public would recognize this, and that would be like Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, Meta AI. Those are the big tech companies. They're going to be known. So that kind of makes sense that they're on the higher end. But some of them actually really threw me for a loop. The fact that Claude wasn't recognized, at a higher percentage when things like Gemini and, Meta AI and things like that are recognized, or Microsoft Copilot. But Claude itself is one of the frontier AI models, right? It's always mentioned in conversation with ChatGPT and OpenAI and things like that. So why isn't the percentage amongst the surveyed public higher? So that kind of threw me for a loop. Also,
is it available? Has it been available in the UK or in these areas?
For most, I have to double check, but I believe for most of these countries, it's been in availability for a while. We understand that Canada's not been only recently as they gain access. But
So this whole study is inconsequential because there's no Canada here, so I
Right.
don't care.
exactly.
Sorry. By the way, we should mention the countries that not Canada. That's not one of them, but they're the 6 countries they picked for this report. And I don't know at the top. I did read the whole forward and stuff. Why these specific countries? I might have missed it, but anyway, it's Argentina, Denmark, France, Japan, United Kingdom, and the U.S. Those are the 6 that they picked here. And like I said, I don't remember specifically reading why these 6, other than Reuters used another service to run this survey, and so that might have had part of it too. I think I want, by the way, and I'm going to roll back what I kind of just said to Andy, which is, Andy, no, I actually now agree with you. Sorry, I'm trying to highlight it at the bottom here. The question itself was, have you heard of any of the following generative AI chatbots or tools? In that case, you're right. Character.ai would definitely fall into that question. So I take back what I said, because I thought this was more maybe because of what they were doing for news and journalism, but that's not really what that question asks. And then they say
and for example, Replica is an empathetic personal friend avatar on, so it had nothing to do with news or journalism, whatever. I'm not surprised, though, that Claude has such a low level of recognition. It doesn't, among the cognoscenti, I think we are, that kind of group around AI. Then Claude is, because of its capabilities and its history in the development of the frontier models, we're all very familiar with it, but it really hasn't found widespread use among the general public. So
let me propose then the one that threw me most for the loop is perplexity, right? And I know we all use perplexity a lot, and I understand coming from your point of view there, Andy, about it maybe not be used by the public as much, but every story I hear about perplexity outside it adding some new feature or anything like that is that it is a competitor or wants to be a competitor for Google. Right. So when you associate the two of them, I'm making the assumption that you're going to hear that in Google News, Google AI News. You're going to hear a perplexity counterpoint, or you're going to hear more about perplexity. So even if you don't use it, I don't know why it has some of the lowest percentages on this list, unless that's kind of what the eye-opening part of this report was for me, is that the bubble is strong, and trying to get that information out to people, get people to improve their AI literacy and try these things out and whatnot, is going to be a much longer or harder journey than I first imagined.
Well, look, Mistral has 3% in France. Right. And so Mistral is often considered to be like the darling. When we hear about it, it's like you hear that France they're very proud of Mistral and what that language model has done. They've released several models, and they're definitely up there in the conversations about strong, strong, I can't think of the word I want, but language models. And a lot of times they're small too, and what they're able to do, like they're 7 billion and stuff like that. They're 7B. So, but you even look in France and you go, wow, you would think this is in the news cycles, right? Mistral AI making a push in AI, blah, blah, blah. And it would just be in the stories in the news cycles, yet it's still only 3%. And to me, what really stands out from this whole report is the bottom one, none of these. So 22%, 21, 24, 19, 30, and 19% across the board had never heard of the people sampled or are surveyed, had never heard of any of these tools, any of them, including ChatGPT. So that just tells you right there, you're talking about 1/5 of the population of the sample, of the surveyed audience doesn't know any of these tools. None of them have any recollection for them. Now, whether there's bias, of course, we don't know. Like people are like, oh, I haven't heard of this, or maybe they heard of one slightly different term and they didn't associate the two. It's hard to say, but still 1/5. And then even for the ones that did have ChatGPT, like they said, oftentimes that's I've used it once, or I've used, it's not like this is perhaps not surprisingly to me, it was the younger generation, your 18 to 24s, because if I was in college or if I was in high school, I would definitely know about ChatGPT. Somebody of mine at some place would have said, hey, this is really helpful with homework and stuff like that. And it would have spread like wildfire through the school. Like my daughter definitely knows about ChatGPT and stuff like that. But the rest of the stuff on here, probably not.
So there's one point that I want to make, which is that they split out Microsoft Copilot and Bing AI. And if those had been combined, they would have been the number 2. And for the number 2, they said Google Gemini, formerly Bard. So it looks like they grouped those for Google's AI, and they did not group it. And I understand that Bing still exists, but I find that weird in terms of like if we're looking at companies that are dominant in this, that Microsoft's 2 very well-known things are listed separately as opposed to Google's. So.
Yeah. And let's move on. So, Karl, I know you talked a bit about, sort of the usage graphs and stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about, and just tell me if I got the right one up here for you? Right?
Yeah, no, it's just, I think like, to me, this is when we see what, there's one thing about hearing about it, then there's another thing about actually using it. So I think this is a very important, one of the most important graphs in this entire document is that where it, like in the specific country, how many people use it daily, weekly, monthly, and then or not heard of it at all. And when people say it's still early days, then you can still see here that if by 7%, it's still early, even with the highest recognition of an AI tool. If you're only talking about 18% who use it either daily or weekly, which I think weekly is, I don't know what their definition of weekly is, but that's really, really a small amount. And I'm still just looking at the United States here too, because that would be, the UK, like maybe Argentina has 6%, 5%. I don't know what the number would be of daily uses, but it's such a small number. If you think about like total population, how many people, and then, or not even population, like just in the survey itself, it's really, really small. And then all the other tools below it too. So that kind of tells you when people are, if you see all these, what comes to mind is we see all these courses talking about prompting and so on. And for us, it's like, oh God, another prompting course. Well, there's a reason for it. And it's because it's such a small amount. According to this survey, that either use it daily or weekly. Like if you use it monthly, to me, I'm like, are you really using it? Are you using it just for like things here and there? So I don't even consider once or twice, like monthly and once or twice. I was like, you might as well not be using it. And then the rest is not using it at all.
Right. Because if you're learning to use it, if you're doing what you need to do to really use it well, you're using it more than monthly. Right.
Yes.
Like, I mean, by definition, you are using it more than monthly and probably more than weekly.
Yes.
And this next graph on here, which is talking about, do you use it in your private life or at work, school? And it's sort of breaking down per country. And so like for the US, 35% were saying in my private life, 28% for school. Argentina was the only one where it was just slightly higher in at work, school than private life. I think this is also really telling because, okay, so now let's just look at what we have here. 20% didn't know what any of these tools were. Okay, of the ones, maybe whatever it was, 40% on average or 30% even knew what ChatGPT was. Okay, so now we're starting at 30%. And then what you just talked about, Karl, about how, okay, you know what it is, great. How often are you even using it? Well, definitely not daily. I mean, that was like 7% or below just in the US, and other ones were lower than that. And then if you went to Gemini or I forget what the third one they had on there was, or Copilot, I think it was, those numbers are even lower. So now we've scrunched down to this really, really small subset. Then you get to that small subset, and then you're asking people, okay, are you using it in your private or at work, school? And then you're looking at, okay, more people are actually using it in their private life. So like, what does that mean? Well, maybe they've done the, oh, I heard there's this cool tool and it'll create a song, right? Or it'll write a poem for my mom's birthday. Fine. Like this sort of early ChatGPT, that this stuff all of us were doing, like, well, this is pretty cool. And so I think that's what we're seeing, is that people are still pretty amazed by these early abilities of what we would consider these text-to-text early abilities from a year and a half or more ago. At least in my life, that's what I'm still hearing people say, is like, oh, it can do this. And then you go, oh, no. That same tool, if you will, custom ChatGPT, can do 17 other things really, really well. That's not even in the realm of, like, possibilities of what maybe a ChatGPT can do. We talked about that on Thursday last week, where we're naming our top 5 tools. We said, truthfully, we could say our top 5 use cases for ChatGPT, and that would be a show. Easily.
Yeah.
We should probably, right?
I think we add the one piece on top of that too. Like, if you combine that together, is the graph before it, where you take it by age, and you still look 18 to 24, 25 to 40, 35. I think that, yeah, it's still 9%, 6%, 4%. Like 18% would be, so 18 to 24 would probably be the highest usage. How much percentage of that do you think it would be for school? Quite a lot. Then 13%, 8%, 6%. So in the 25 to 35, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, the big actual bucket where people are using it for work, it's even lower, like lower and lower. So it's kind of, to me, and a question to all of you, are we so far, like us as a group, so far in that AI bubble that when it's inconceivable that outside of that bubble, people wouldn't be using it? You'd be like, why wouldn't you use this? But then all these numbers tell us, wait a second, that means no one uses it? Like what like, when I...
Let me say that this survey, again, is looking at the general population, and this was done in April. So there was a period of time in April. Just 1 month prior, McKinsey did their annual survey, which is focused not on the general public, but on enterprises and on business workplaces. And what they report is that use of generative AI doubled between 2023 and 2024, from 33% of respondents to 65% of responding companies. So now a majority of companies are using it in at least one business function. And that's popping the overall graph of AI implementation in companies pretty substantially, where it really starts back in 2018, when companies started to use AI, machine learning, if you will, not generative AI, but AI tools inside enterprises at about the 50% level. About half of all reporting companies said that they had some machine learning system in place in at least one business function. And now it bumped from 55% in 2023 to 72% this year. So yeah, I think there is a bubble, and we're really, voices for what the use is in the context of LinkedIn, which is where we do our live broadcasts. And here in this little bubble, there's a lot more awareness, and certainly of things like perplexity and so on, because of the utility of those things. Whereas, like in my personal household, even though I'm on the Daily AI Show, my family doesn't watch the Daily AI Show, and they don't use any of those tools. They literally don't use them except once a month. So I'm putting them in the bucket that you defined, Karl, which is once a month is not enough to make you a practical user.
And so I remember talking to you, Brian, and even just my experience, let's say at like an enterprise tech software company, and like the CTO is pushing AI. Everyone's like trying to get to use AI. And the example I had was like, yeah, ChatGPT for enterprise was introduced. Cool. I used their version, like the company version of ChatGPT for enterprise, 3 times. That's it. Over the course of 3 months, I used it 3 times because all my GPTs, everything on my personal account. Out of 1,100 employees that got access to this, I was still using it just 3 times, still number 58 on like, because they tracked all the metrics. Number 58. So that tells you, like, even the usage in big corporations, it's still like, even with like tech companies, it's still kind of low, because when in McKinsey's report, if you think about it, I didn't think they dig deep enough, because they didn't ask, I don't remember, and Andy, maybe you can correct me, did they ask how many people were using it daily, monthly, weekly? Did they actually ask that? I'm not sure. I don't think they asked that. And then what will you consider use? Because I think, for example, I have built multiple kind of either automations or GPTs, and then I would deploy it, and then everybody would say, hey, you got to use this because of this. I would say, of that, whether I built it or the company built it, how many people are actually using it? So would the company consider use that we built something? And if they consider that use, I don't think that's correct, because then people in the company still have to use the tool that you built. So there's also that like qualification if you, because I know companies have built things or tried to get people to use them. He's just wondering, is like, are people actually using the things that they built, and does that count as usage, which could be a little bit lower or could be a little bit inflated by McKinsey.
Yeah, McKinsey report does delve into the to use an AI term. It does go into most frequent use, and of course, I think we would all be able to quickly answer the question that the business function where enterprises are using it most frequently is in marketing and sales. And there, 34% of responding organizations regularly are using generative AI for marketing and sales. That's the top level. Now, that's just a third. So still early days.
If you think about it, like obviously we're in the bubble, right? So we're like, how does not, we talk about this all day, and so we're all very aware that we obviously talk about it. That's what the show is here for, is to bring this to more people who don't want to spend all day talking about it. They want to get 30 to 40 minutes worth of a snapshot and then go, yeah, that's good enough for me, and that was the whole point of doing the show. But, like I think back to when I had the CrossFit or, and then people thought it was a Bowflex. And I mean, I was in the CrossFit community. I lived and breathed it. And the people who came to my gym lived and breathed it for the most part. And we went to competitions and stuff like that. And large, massive, competitions would happen in the area. 600, 700, 800 people competing on a Saturday morning. But did anybody outside of my teeny tiny bubble have any concept that was going on down the street in some light industrial park? Of course not, And so I think that's to be expected here. And look, even when, Karl, you were just saying this, but like, even when you go to a company and you have top-down support and you build the tool and it saves 95%, it's an increase of 95% efficiency to something that people don't even like doing, you will still fight change. For a task they don't even like doing, you will still fight that change to get them to use a better tool. That we just know, that's human. So I think there's a lot of that going on here as well. 14, you were saying, Karl, you want me to put what?
Yeah, if you go to 14, this is just interesting to see what type of uses people were, what were people using it for? So answering factual questions, there's still a lot of, they split it into getting information and creating media, and I think this is part of it too. There's other uses for not just creating and getting information. There's a lot of like analysis or things too, but it's just fascinating to see they divided into what people were using it for playing around it. So there's another thing too. How many people are actually using it as a productivity tool, like daily, reliable productivity tool versus I'm just going to play around with it, or I'm just going to play around with this GPT, see if I can do anything with it. Oh, I can't? Okay, that's fine. I'm out. And like with a tech or software company, you're going to get I think it's higher proportion because you're going to have a lot of software engineers, coding, development. But outside of that industry, how many people are using it for anything else other than like these two areas, right? Asking advice, generating ideas. It's still such a, I was like,
And
I would think,
clearly we're trying to get to the news and journalism side of it, which they're highlighting here on the screen. They're bolding out getting the latest news. I will be the first to say, I am not relying on I think, nope, I'm not relying on any tool unless technically AI overview comes up on Google for latest news. Like, so I don't use generative AI that way currently, mainly, and they definitely talk about this because they ask in deeper parts of the report, like, hey, how do you think that if somebody uses AI as part of the editor experience and putting a report together, do you think that there needs to be a label on that? And so people were like, even in this report, they were saying, even if you use like a spell check or an AI, like a basic, what we would consider to be a basic AI tool to just make it a little bit better writing or whatever, lots of people, not the majority, but lots of people said, yeah, that should be identified almost like you would identify this is an ad. It looks like a blog, but this is an ad and it has to be identified that way. I found that really, really interesting. But I don't know, I'll ask you guys, like, getting the latest news 5%, I kind of feel like that's even high, but that's just me. Like, do you guys use it in that way?
So I think part of what we were seeing in this is people not understanding what the processes are, like how is news created, that sort of thing. So I think like people have a concept of spell check and grammar check, right? And that feels like, okay, this is familiar. Yes, I can see them doing it, and I don't know why they feel like that needs to be said, because I think most people are using spell check, right? Like, and is AI spell check different than regular spell check, right? Like, AI suggests a different word maybe in spell check, but that's sort of, we've talked about this in terms of Siri as well, that people will say, I've never used AI before, but I do ask Siri questions, right? So I'm not sure that there is a clear general understanding in the public about what is AI and what isn't. And so these are a little bit more like, it's important to me that you have the right word. Therefore, I want to know if you used AI to spell check it or grammar it. That's really my sense of this. Like, it was also kind of surprising the number of things that they thought needed to be that rose to the top. But also, like, the second one was we want you to say you've used AI for headlines, right? News headlines. That needs to be documented. And I think that has to do with the clickbaitiness, right? But like that clickbaity AI is trained on human clickbaity like practices. So that wasn't an AI thing first. And AI is just being used to analyze the data. So the effectiveness of titles is more readily apparent, I think.
Look, I don't know if you guys agree with this. I think I would want to know, not did you use AI to write a title? What I want to know is, were the next evolution of cookies or some sort of trackable data used to change the title just for me? Because I think that's
yes.
that's where things get a little crazy. If you go to a reputable source like Reuters or AP News, which I go to both of them all the time, because for me, I'm not a politic thing or anything like that. I just feel like I'm getting more straight to the point, especially AP and Reuters, where I'm not getting as much, spin on it, if you will, from either side. Excuse me. But I would definitely want to know. I wouldn't be that surprised to see from a CNN or a Fox, right? Both sides of that spectrum. But if an AP or Reuters started utilizing its AI technology, where based on my browser history, like a Facebook would or something like that, they started manipulating the titles or the content in the blog to reach my eyeballs better and get me to click through to something, I would definitely want to know that. Did they use it to spell check, Grammarly, whatever? And every one of us sees the exact same thing if we go to that URL. No, that doesn't bother me, because I think, that's what everybody's doing. They're using AI to try to put a better product out there. But if you're manipulating it to make it so that I see a different product than you do, Beth, I do think that should be something in the future. If we get there, then that should be something that's identified, like an ad. Because at that point, that's kind of what you're saying.
But then what are they going to say, right? They're going to say a general statement about we use AI to personalize the content so that we're showing you things we think you're interested in. They're not going to say, hey, totally, we analyze your cookies and we select the language we think will make you click on the link.
And that's really where I'll say I think this report kind of doesn't go to, and it's fine because we're not there yet, really. But this is talking about, do you trust AI in the current state of journalism? And where my brain goes is like, yeah, but it won't be like this. This isn't the future of journalism with AI, nor is it the future of education with AI. It's this whole fundamentally different thing that's going to emerge one way or another. And that's what I think the really bigger question could be. I totally understand why this report exists and why Reuters did it, but I definitely think there's a larger discussion here about, well, okay, hold on a second. What happens when things can be manipulated and changed in ad and news? Because our perception is like, if I read a blog, it's the same blog everybody else saw, and that's not the future. You know? Okay. Well, listen, this is a great report. I would share the link, but it's like, forever and a day long. What I'll say is that you can go to Reuters, and what I would do is look up AI in the future of news, and that's going to get you to this report. It's a PDF. Anybody can get it. It's publicly accessible. And I would say take a look at it if you're interested in diving deeper. We didn't really get into the news and journalism side of it as much. That's definitely, maybe why the survey was commissioned. But there's obviously so much other good information there that we want to kind of share. As far as today and tomorrow goes, today, if you want to see what Apple is announcing in terms of Siri, we've talked about it many times in the show. That'll be happening at 10 a.m. Pacific time today, 1 p.m. on the East Coast. And you can go to apple.com, or I'm sure YouTube and various other sources if you're interested in watching that live. The reason I bring that up is because that's what we will be talking about tomorrow. So if you don't want to watch that live, but you just want the cliff notes, come on back tomorrow. We'll be talking about all the things that are announced, whether they're impressive, not impressive. Did Siri just get a whole lot smarter? All of the above. That'll be on tomorrow's show. Wednesday, we'll be back with the news. Thursday, we're talking about, can frontier models keep growing at 5x per year, which is what they're currently on pace to do. And Friday, we're going to take another look at Canva's newest, as they called it, their glow up, their newest AI features. Because Canva continues to be, one of those tools that becomes more and more powerful for people in business, but also in their personal life as well. So we'll talk about that on Friday. That's what we have coming up the rest of the week. So come on back. Thank you to everybody. Thanks for the comments, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Till then.
Aloha.